Welcome back to Reclaiming Your Mind with Catherine Newton and Relational Healing. Today we're going to be talking about self-care. And this is a huge, huge thing for childhood trauma survivors because most of the time what we do is we ignore ourselves and we ignore our body, and there's a disconnect between our mind and our body. And so we tend to push ourselves too hard, not pay attention when our body tells us to stop. And then we end up with chronic injuries and illnesses and things like that. So we don't give ourselves permission to take care of ourselves most of the time. And when you can get to the point where you're noticing that you're making your self-care a priority, then you're doing extremely well. So I just want to talk today about developing that self-care ritual for yourself, that daily self-care ritual that you don't skip, that you take seriously. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about my own. And I'm going to ask you to really, now that you have some strategies for reducing dysregulation, before you move into more of the meat of this course, I really want you to think about developing and using a daily self-care routine and ritual. So for me personally, what I do is when I wake up in the morning, I don't jump right out of bed. I stretch out in bed. I lift my legs up, I look at my legs, I twist them around a little bit, I pull them towards me to give myself some stretch, and I stretch out and make really wild noises like, I know that's silly, but I make those weird noises, and my dogs really look at me strange. And so then I get up, and each one of my dogs, I have a 130-pound Anatolian Shepherd and an 80-pound Shepherd, and they sleep next to me on the floor. And what I do is the first thing I do is I get down on the floor and I rub them a little bit because they're waiting to be rubbed. And I say good morning to them, and I kiss them and I hug them and I pet them. And then I go over and say good morning to my husband and give him a hug. And then we go outside because it's time to get a little fresh air and, do the bathroom routine, that kind of thing. Go in the kitchen, take my vitamins. I don't make a cup of coffee right away because normally I will walk the dogs then. And so I live in the middle of a forest. Thank God, it's so beautiful. And we have a road through the forest, lots of different roads through the forest. And then if I really want to go into the woods, there's also trails that I can walk. But I usually just take the dogs for a walk, and it usually takes me about 45 minutes to an hour. And while I'm walking the dogs, I try really hard to practice mindfulness and to not get in my head. And I really focus on that back and forth movement of my feet so I get that bilateral. And so if there is anything troubling me, I just kind of let it float up into my brain, and I might chew on it a little bit. I might pray about it a little bit. And so I will, just as I walk through the woods, notice that I'm just getting lighter and lighter. I might, talk to God about what I'm afraid of. I might chew on any resentments that I might have and try to let them go. And as I walk through the woods, I just feel my spirit getting lighter and lighter. And sometimes I have to pull myself out of my head and notice the birds, notice the temperature, so that I don't miss out on those things. And of course, in the forest, certain times of the year, depending on the season, there is a whole lot more to look at. I'm really looking forward to raspberries season because there's raspberries all along the path. And little Kathy, my little girl inside, loves picking raspberries and finding raspberries. I feel like I found gold when I find raspberries. And so I indulge myself with that. And my dogs have actually learned to find the raspberries for me to pick. So it's kind of neat. So then when I get home, I might relax and get a cup of coffee. By then, my husband's in the living room, and he will read devotions, we call it. So I'll sit and listen to him read 5 chapters of the Bible if I can, because I think that's a good way to start out my day. That's just part of my belief system. It's tough sometimes to sit and listen to him read. So I will read my own, and sometimes I read my own at night, not in the morning. And so on the way to work, I will listen to something, maybe a pastor talking about the Bible, or I might listen to somebody who's an online person who talks about trauma, and I will listen to something like that on YouTube on my way to work because it takes me about 50 minutes to get to work. And so then when I get to work, I am working all day and I make sure that I have healthy food here to eat, something that feels nourishing to me. So I try to always bring fresh fruit, try to always make sure I have a healthy lunch and even some snacks during the day because this is hard work. Emotionally, especially, it can be emotionally draining if I don't take good care of myself. I make sure that I don't pack people in back to back to back. I always make sure I have a break in the middle of that day so that I can take care of myself and deal with any of my emotions that might have gotten triggered, maybe during somebody else's session. And so then at night, I go home, and right now I'm working on puzzles because I'm fasting from TV, which I'm not happy about. I'm doing a 40-day fast, which will be over on April 8th. TV at nighttime just kind of helps me veg out, and I almost need to do that for about an hour. And I spend time with my animals again, spend time with my husband, do some floor exercises, crunches and free weights, just not too many, just enough to kind of keep myself strong and my core strength. And then at night, sometimes I'll get on Facebook and just kind of catch up. I don't do a lot on Facebook, but I might do that right before I go to bed. And I try to get in bed now by about 10:30 or 11. And I don't really see my first patient until about 11 o'clock the next day. So at least I have my morning free. I think that's really important. I might work till 7, but at least I have that morning time free. So whatever schedule works for you, if you have the flexibility in your schedule, really think about what you can do to build your own self-care routine. On the weekends, I enjoy walking, hiking. I always have a project going. I love mosaics, and so I work with mosaics sometimes and make projects or make signs. I love I have a yurt, which I'll show you guys sometime pictures of my yurt. So I love hanging out in there because I made it like a girl cave. It's called the Redbird Yurt in honor of my mother who loved cardinals. And so I will hang out in there certain times of the year. I just love being creative. So I got a bunch of bricks for cheap, and I'm looking forward to making a brick patio. One time I made a wood-fired pizza oven outside from Cobb. So anything, I just enjoy exploring, building things, making things. And so that I always put in on the weekends. And then I go to church on the weekends too. I find that very uplifting. I just enjoy the worship. I love listening to music as part of my self-care ritual. I sing in the forest while I'm walking. So those are just some ideas, guys. You come up with your own self-care ritual, and I really want you to write it down so that you can hold yourself accountable to actually practicing this on a daily basis. And it doesn't have to be a big, huge, long one. 1 or 2 or 3 things that you can do consistently is good. That's all for now. We'll see you soon.